Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here with us. I'm your host, Meagan Henriques. I want to kick things off with some big numbers for you all to contemplate. Canadian women are expected to hold $3.3 trillion in personal wealth by 2026, according to a study by TD Wealth in 2017. Our incomes have grown 60% on average since 1976, per Statistics Canada. And we're already the primary earners in a third of households today. Clearly, women as a demographic are becoming more influential in financial matters than ever before. And will be taking an even greater lead on important decisions across our own lives and our families. Now, every one of our circumstances is unique. So there is no clear or best approach to handling many of these key decisions. But what can be helpful is talking more openly about our experiences to learn from one another. And that's what we'll be doing in this webinar. Joining me are my fellow client education instructors, Ivy Han and Caitlin Cormier. The three of us have nearly 30 years of experience in the financial industry between us. And we're going to share with you some of the major financial decisions that many women have faced, some of the best practices that can help them in those situations, and how we decided to navigate those decisions in our own lives. Hopefully, our stories will help you in your financial journey. Ivy, Caitlin, great to chat with you both.
Yeah, happy to be here, Megan.
Thanks for having us.
So, let's start our conversation by talking through those early years in a woman's career. This is when investing should pop onto the radar, but too often it doesn't. A survey by Financial Planning Canada found nearly 4 in 10 single Canadian women admitted they knew very little about finance and investing. Caitlin, would you say that described you?
So I have to admit that I only really started thinking a lot more about investing when I started working in the financial industry. So I started working with TD kind of right out of university. Before that, in my circle of friends, we really didn't talk about finances. We really didn't, it wasn't kind of the first topic of conversation that came up within my group of friends. That may be the case with other women, who knows? But certainly at a younger age, prior to having work friends, wasn't really something that came up a whole lot. One thing that I was very lucky with is when I did start working, I had a mentor, a money mentor, who helped me actually get set up with a retirement savings plan sort of right off the bat. So she kind of came over and said, you really need to have this set up. I didn't really know a whole lot about it. I was just really starting out, and she went through the whole process with me. She explained everything to me. And she kind of helped me pick what would be a good thing for me to invest in. She kind of helped me along that path and got me set up with a savings plan. She talked me through kind of the idea of making sure you pay yourself first, having that automated savings, sticking to the plan, increasing it over time, and all those sorts of things. And honestly, I mean, it helped me buy my first house. I used my RSP to buy my first house under the home buyers plan. So to me, it was so important to have that mentor of somebody to kind of come over to me and say, like, this is what you need to do, and go through the conversation with me. I think that's one thing to keep in mind is I didn't, even though I had been through, finance in school, I certainly wasn't an expert in investing. I hadn't done it myself yet at that point, but it's just kind of about trying to find someone, to help you through that process, and also to kind of build those habits and get that stuff in place so that you kind of have a good financial plan set up right from the beginning. And then also, like, have that conversation with your friends. I mean, somebody you're comfortable with, of course. You want to make sure it's somebody that you're comfortable talking to. But whether you have close family or friends, or somebody that you can kind of talk to about finances, sort of keeping it on keeping it top of mind, so that's something that you think about sort of early on, as opposed to delaying it until later.
No, I think that's really helpful for you to be sharing that with us, Caitlin. So it seems like initially you may have not been talking about finances with your friends, but thanks to your money mentor, let's call it, you were able to put that money aside and you were able to use that money for your first home. So if we were to go to
Exactly.
Ivy, were you discussing finances with your friends?
Well, truth be told, I also didn't talk much about money growing up or with my friends. And it sort of only started later on when I started my career with TD about 7, 10 years ago. So, interestingly enough, the same FP Canada survey actually have found that nearly 6 in 10 women, who've been polled, said that they didn't have a written financial plan. So, I find that point to be very interesting and quite important actually for women and perhaps not just for women investors, but really just to be able to establish that from the get go, because it really gives you that North Star, when it comes to investing and sort of provides you with the guidelines to make your investing decisions earlier on. So I know that it can certainly be tough, right, to get started, to sort of go where you want to go financially. But I find that to be one of the major points. And for me, I think the biggest part that I sort of wanted to emphasize is you wanted to figure out your financial plan or your investing plan. It doesn't have to be financial, or any sort of plan early on. And that would actually involve understanding your investor profile, and making sure that you understand your financial goals, investing goals, whatever the goal that you may have, how much money that you're looking to put into the markets if we're talking about investing, and then how much money you would have available to invest early on, how much you wanted to put into the markets, and then how much risk you're willing to take on and comfortable taking on physically and mentally. And it really helps, I guess, just from my perspective. With all of the decisions that you're going to make in line with your short-term and long-term goal in the future. So I actually sort of learned this the hard way. Just to give everyone a sort of an anecdote, is I started investing a while back, and it wasn't, based on investor profile or anything like that. So I actually started investing in this airline company based on a friend's recommendation. And of course, the company actually did go up, right? Purchased the actual investment, and the investment actually did rise. And after a while, I felt good about it, but then eventually it fell, and uh, you know it never really recovered while I held it in my account. So, like, I think I would have made those decisions, nowadays looking back, if it didn't really fit my investor profile. So, since this early experience, I've taken now what we call the TD Investor Profiles questionnaire. And having taken that, I have now figured out that I'm more of a conservative investor. I am, more inclined to stick to strategies that are more conservative, and of course, like looking at investments that really suit my comfort level. And those are sort of the things I've learned since that investment. And then I've also learned that I like to plan things out in detail, and really consider the risks before investing. Take the investor profile questionnaire just to give yourself a starting point, and then figure out your investing style, and then from there you can sort of learn how to invest the way that suits you. And of course, and just last point is knowing that the investor profile will certainly evolve over time.
No, that's an excellent point to bring up. So many things for us to consider when we start investing. Um, like Kaylin had said, that like by staying consistent, so since she was always putting a portion into her investing goal, she was able to use that money to buy her home. And like you said, Ivy, it's really important to figure out what your risk tolerance is, so that way when you're building your investment plan, it's within your own comfort level, so it's something that you can stay invested in without feeling the anxiety when things don't necessarily go our way all the
For
time.
sure.
So I guess if I were to compare myself and my journey along the my financial journey, I would say is that I was actually someone who was kind of almost obsessed with talking about money. So whether my friends were in finance or not, I would force them into having these conversations, because I think for a lot of us, we know that, almost to Ivy's point, that for most of us, we're not going to get rich quick, that it is something that takes a long time. So, building those good habits is what's going to really get us to where we would want to be. And sometimes we get caught up in those short term fluctuations, that, like, when things drop, we're like, should I get out? Should I sell? When really, if we're thinking about big picture, it can kind of relieve some of that stress and we can stay invested for those long terms. One thing I would say that can be difficult to new investors, or at least this was something that I experienced when I started investing, is to resist that fear of missing out. So, FOMO. So, a lot of times when you start to invest, you may see a sector or a company that a lot of people are talking about, and you think, like, oh, I guess this is it. This is how I'm going to be able to retire, um, like tomorrow. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. And especially with social media, sometimes it seems a bit flawed that we're only seeing about when they're making money versus when they're not. So I think it's really important to remind ourselves of confirmation bias, where again, we're seeking information to confirm what we already believe. And if we were to go back to that social media, people will usually not brag about losing money, but only talk about their success stories. So, very important to take everything that we've discussed today, kind of figuring out what it is that you're working towards, building those good habits of putting that money aside for your investment goals and knowing your risk tolerance, which, like Ivy had mentioned, is something that will fluctuate along your journey. Okay, let's shift gears to another stage in life that can bring a lot of financial heartache if you aren't prepared, and that's sharing finances in a long term relationship. Believe it or not, 4 in 5 millennials surveyed by TD said they would leave their partner if they were secretive about their finances. Well, nearly 3 in 10 also said they were hiding a financial secret. So, Ivy, what's your approach to sharing finances at home?
We don't tell each other the every single little expense that we spend on things, and I think that just works for our family. We both trust each other that we're able to make smart decisions with our money, but especially in our joint account. And I think it's a really really key aspect when it comes to not just investing, and it's really about sharing finances. It's about building that trust from the beginning and that transparency about each other's spending and saving habits, where you're spending money on, and really coming to a consensus on some of the key financial decisions that we make together in our household. So things like housing cost, groceries, entertainment. And I think it's important to really note that it does take time. It's never going to happen overnight. So it took us a little while, to get that and to be able to be transparent with our finances with each other. And like for example in our household now, or it has been that for a little while now, so we actually split our money fairly evenly around common expenses. So when we call common expenses, it would be like expenses that we would cover around the house, kids because we've got two, and we also have individual accounts for our discretionary spending, which we don't really tell each other about. Those are sort of like the free money that we can use on each other if we want to, or on ourselves. And this sort of goes back to our like the whole point about sharing financial values. I think just in general, for our house, we both think about the family first. So having that mindset with the major expenses that we share, and then I think it just makes it whole lot easier for the financial decisions that you're going to make down the road. And over the years, like for myself, I've used just an Excel spreadsheet, not on a daily basis, just on a monthly basis, just to record some of those like major purchases or major expenses, just to help me to stay on track. And again, this has worked for us. There could be other ways to make this work for, I guess, for people without making this, I would say, so much of an awkward experience with your other half.
No, that's extremely helpful to hear. I know for me, I've been recently more into my budgets, so I have my own Excel sheet. But yeah, I think it's really important that as we are in this long-term relationship that we discuss finances. I know for my relationship, it was something that we discussed early on, but to be completely honest, it was something that was extremely nerve-wracking for me. I was very nervous to bring up this topic because it's awkward and uncomfortable, and you're kind of afraid that when you are vulnerable about how you feel about money, that it could be a deal breaker for the other person. But I think avoidance isn't really going to get you to where you want to be anyways. So in my relationship, we discussed finances early. Um, and I think what was great about those conversations is that we were able to find our core value of where we really align on where we would want to spend money. Right now, it's mainly food. Whereas in life, like there's obviously also differing values that we have that are a priority to me and maybe not to him, and some are priorities to him that are not to me. But I think because we've developed and we've talked about it over the course of the years, we are able to know where we stand on things. And like for me, having my financial independence is so important that when we were discussing how, like, once we get married, how we're going to join things together, we ended up deciding that what's going to work best for us in our relationship is to have some joint accounts for our joint expenses and then our individual accounts for those discretionary spending. But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is to have the open and honest conversations. And because we were able to have these conversations throughout the years of us being together, once we did get engaged and we started planning for our wedding, it was something that was easier to discuss of like, okay, we want to get married. What's our budget? What type of vision do we have for this? And even though it's still uncomfortable, to be completely honest, of like, we don't need this, he feels we need that, like whatever the case may be. I think it's helped along the way to like compromise and come to consensus of where we want to be. And what we've decided that's going to work for us is we're going to finance our wedding based on our budget. So that way we're not tempted to kind of go too extravagant and go way beyond our means. Caitlin, would you mind sharing your experience?
Yeah, not at all. So I have to say, when kind of talking about people keeping financial secrets and the kind of the survey question, I do find that's a little bit surprising. I mean, I know that I've heard one of the top reasons that couples do end up breaking up is around disagreements over money. So I can understand it's definitely an issue that needs to be kind of discussed. To me, kind of trust is one of the key things to help kind of with, as you both have said, to helping a relationship work with finances. One thing that my partner and I did was kind of tell each other about any large debts or expenses or anything that we had kind of on our personal side within our lives, when we were kind of moving our finances together, kind of moving in together. So things like cars, loan payments, all those sorts of things. Um, we were a little bit later on in our lives, so we were both kind of in our 30s when we were coming together. So we did both have kind of fully formed financial situations. All of those, things that may have happened in the past were already sort of formed, and we kind of figured out our groove about how we feel individually about finances. So when we came together, we kind of both came from a strong position. In general, my partner and I are pretty much on the same page when it comes to spending, which I feel very fortunate about. We both like to brag about how cheap we are and how much we enjoy buying things on sale. For example, recently we recently got a cat, and I was looking for cat food. And I was kind of talking to him about it. He's like, "Listen, I know that you always look for the best deal, so it's totally fine. Like whatever you found, I'm sure is good." So we kind of have that mutual where we both like to find, good prices for things. We're willing to pay for some stuff, but we do also really like to find a good deal when possible. Um, and we openly talk about the expenses that we want to share and kind of how we're going to divide it up. So I think it's important to kind of clearly outline those sorts of things when you are getting, moving in together, sort of kind of moving your lives together, to sort of have that conversation, even if it is uncomfortable, like you said, or awkward. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, it is important just to have those conversations, and try and kind of move through them. I know for us, like I said, we do keep a lot of independence in our finances, kind of similar to what Megan said. I am very financially independent, as is he. So we like to sort of have our own, but there are a lot of things that we do split, and we use an app sort of to kind of help with that. We have an app that kind of helps us put in our expenses and be able to kind of pay one another back, sort of thing, for those types of expenses. And again, this didn't happen overnight. Like as Ivy said, it does take time to kind of find that groove and figure out what works, through trial and error and conversation, all that fun stuff. But I think at the end of the day, just having that open conversation, kind of getting on the same page as far as like a budget and joint expenses, those things that you can't really avoid, sort of figuring out how those are going to be handled instead of avoiding them. So again, like the spending tracker that I use is really is easy. It's kind of an easy way to sort of put that sort of things in there if you don't have like a joint account that you're using to put all your expenses through. And it also helps to kind of build that transparency around finances, like Ivy was talking about. And then at the end, that creates the trust. So it kind of doesn't show that you're hiding things from one another. You're open and honest about those types of expenses. But again, like we also have, like I said, we are independent. We do have our expenses that we do, for ourselves that we don't necessarily kick in for. So my hobbies, his hobbies, we kind of, don't pay for those for one another. But yeah, I'd say that kind of having that open and honest discussion and kind of building that trust is the best way to go.
So, all in all, have these conversations, even though they suck, let's be honest. But they will get you ahead. And at the end, you actually feel closer to your partner once you're able to kind of get over any conflict. All right. The last major challenge I wanted to discuss can be a difficult one for many parents: investing for your child's future and teaching them how to be smart with their money. Another survey by TD found that a third of parents said they aren't confident they're setting a healthy financial example for their children. Ivy, I'll go back to you on this one since you have a 6-year old. What are you and your husband doing to get your child on the right track?
So I think it's very important for both parents to be on the same page, right, about the messages that they wanted to teach their children. Because otherwise, if you're not on the same page, then I think there might be the potential for the kid to be confused about the messages, or they may try to play one parent off the other just to get what they potentially want. So, and of course, with kids, it's always going to be a learning process. I would think for parents, and I think a lot of the parents, they expect their children to, fully learn about money management when they're in school. But actually, I think now parents have figured out that it doesn't really happen as much as some might assume. And thankfully, my husband and I, we actually share a lot of those key financial values about kids, about how we wanted to raise our children, how we wanted to insert, money management, or teach him about money management early on. Even though we had completely different upbringings, just as far as finances go. So, and some of the things that actually key things that we try to sort of do is we try to integrate some key little, money management, what we call money management lessons, into our everyday life, uh, so that they're tangible for our children, because we have two. The younger one is a little bit too young to learn things, so he sort of learns from his older brother. But it's those things that really would be able to, that you would want to insert into their life to get them started early. And we believe that like starting early with this sort of education is quite important to hopefully build good financial habits down the road. So, for example, like some of the basic things that we actually have been doing to sort of insert the money management concept onto our older one is that when we play like board games, for example, like Monopoly, whichever, just even for in video games now, that a lot of them would have digital money or digital dollars that you can spend on. And I think one of the things that we've really tried to stress through all of this is the importance of saving for the future in our household. And hopefully when it hopefully in the future, this will actually teach him about the value of investing later on in life, right? When he's able to grasp the concept of investing later on. And I think it's different with every child, and how they learn about money. So I think it's quite important, to sort of know that what worked for our family may not work for you. So sort of finding that balance.
Kids are really good at kind of comparing themselves and kind of using that to get what they want. So that kind of brings us to kind of a hot topic that a lot of parents go through, and it's on allowance. So, Caitlin, for you, when you were growing up, did you get an allowance?
So I didn't. I didn't have an allowance growing up, but I did have some odd jobs that I worked for money. So kind of below when I was under kind of the age to actually be able to work, I did do some jobs like babysitting, and I had some snow shoveling that I would do to kind of earn some extra cash. But kind of as a general rule, if I did need money, I would try and just go to my parents and ask for money from them. The other thing that tended to work out for me as well is if I went out and if there was something I wanted to buy, maybe there was like a new outfit or something like that, I would go with my mom and then try and kind of see if she wanted to split it with me, maybe instead of me having to pay for it, to try and kind of find some ways to get things maybe a little bit when I didn't have enough money to get it. But I do feel like a little bit of because of not having that maybe allowance over the years, that I may not have kind of appreciated the value of a dollar as much as I maybe could have. Because when I did have money for sure, especially when I was younger, I really ended up spending it on things that I maybe didn't need. For example, my extensive DVD collection didn't age so well as far as value goes. So, I mean, during high school and university, it was like I saved a bit, but I would say that I definitely did a lot of discretionary spending. So it was a bit of a shock to the system when I graduated and kind of started taking on everything, with a job and rent and all of these other things, kind of into the real world, if you will. So I think that it could have potentially been a good idea to have, or maybe kind of in the future be a good idea to have some structure around money for kids when kind of having an allowance or something for them to sort of understand about kind of saving and spending and investing, maybe kind of getting that set up nice and early to kind of help them um, kind of build some guidance around budgeting and managing money. I think if that had happened, I might have had a little bit of a better idea of that. Although I can't say that I regret my DVD collection because there's some gems in there for sure. But as a general rule, I'm sure that I could have maybe found some better habits at a younger age.
I love that. Personally, I also had a huge DVD collection at my parents' house, so there was no regrets there. It was a very important thing in our family at the time. So I guess on my end, going back to that allowance type of topic, since I don't have kids, so my perspective will be solely from my upbringing. We didn't get allowance as kids, so the only way I would have been able to earn money was through, in my case, piano competitions. And at the time, you would only get cash if you won like the top three spots, and then you would get some cash prize. It wasn't like a significant amount, but at the time it was like my only source of income. So I really had to work out hard throughout the years to get them because competitions were few and far between. But what this actually gave me was that when I would win and I would have that money, since it was my only source of income, like I had mentioned, I had to be really wise on what I would spend it on. So this kind of gave me a bit of a sense of like money equals freedom. So instead of spending it, I just wanted to get more. Um, I don't know if this is the most healthy relationship with money that there is out there, but that's my relationship with
Money
money.
hoarder.
Yeah. So in a way, I am like really grateful that my parents gave me this extreme sense of like putting aside money for later because as we know it, life can be quite expensive. And since I was able to build those consistent savings habit, I probably still like have that. No, I probably don't, but I used to save all my money in an envelope and just like count it every once in a while and just feel like, oh, I did so well. There's $50 here. So yeah, I think overall what's important is to be able to build good habits because it's not easy to get rich fast. So whether you're an adult or you're teaching kids, I think having that consistency of putting that money aside for your future goals can really be worthwhile. Even if a portion of that money is going towards a DVD collection, I think there's still no shame. We're going to have to wrap our conversation there. It's been a ton of fun talking money with the two of you, and we're not done yet. We're going to head over to our Q&A in just a moment. Just a quick reminder to check out the Learning Center on Webroker. We have so many resources available about personal finance and getting ready to invest for anyone looking for some help, from video lessons to master classes to webinars like this one. Now, without further ado, let's jump over to our live Q&A.